Hi everyone, welcome to this third video regarding iOS 14 and getting your user acquisition campaigns ready. So during that third video, we're going to talk about SKAdNetwork. So that may be the most technical, complicated topic, but also the most important. So I really advise you guys to really be concentrated on this. So quick disclaimer regarding the content here. It's updated until mid-December, so any change in the future may affect the content I'm presented here. Let's start with SKAdNetwork. So what is it? First of all, it's Apple's tracking solution as a fallback to IDFA. We mentioned it in the first video that IDFA opt-in rate may be low in the future, so SKAdNetwork becomes vital in the sense that it's Apple that provide that solution if IDFA is not triggered. So this is the actually the only way to get the deterministic data outside of IDFA. So it may become the primary source of attribution in the future under iOS 14. And what's important is you need to understand and anticipate the limits of SKAdNetwork. So there are many limits that affect the way we're going to do user acquisition and how we're going to adapt our campaign and strategy. So the main limits are, first of all, the aggregated data. So you won't have, as you used to, user level data. You won't be able to build cohorts as you were able to do in the past. Now you will have aggregated data, so a bunch of data that would be much harder to analyze and with less granularity. So that's probably the main limit that we have with SKAdNetwork. The second, I would say, big limit is the 100 campaign IDs. SKAdNetwork limit the number of campaigns you can track up to 100 per app per source. So for a given app and a given source, you will only be able to track 100 campaigns. So it can really be small when you consider Facebook and all the granularity we can have per campaign, ad set, creative. And the thing is, we don't know yet how every source will integrate that constraints with SKAdNetwork, because it's up to every source to integrate this campaign ID with SKAdNetwork. So we'll see how every source manages it and the possibilities we'll have. Let's consider Facebook. Will they have a different tracking flow, a different campaign structure, and no more maybe campaign ad set ads, but maybe only campaign and ads to limit the granularity and to make sure that we really use that 100 campaign ID the best way possible. And one important thing is that if you are working with, I don't know, 2 agencies, different partners, a freelance, and you manage your campaign directly, for example, you will have to make sure that you don't cannibalize with maybe the agency you work with, because this will be important when doing campaigns on the same source for the same app. So make sure that everything's like set up properly in terms of how you work with your partners. Another point is that there is only one pass back to qualify the users. So we'll go back to this right after, because that's probably one of the biggest points to understand at the moment, is that now you will only be able to get one data, I would say, per install, meaning that before you knew that those users made a purchase, a registration, I don't know, a subscription, different events. Here, you will only have one that can be triggered. It's very important, and we'll talk about it in depth just after. The other thing is that there's no real-time data. So at the moment, you are able to receive data in real time and manage your campaign very quickly, update your budgets, cut campaigns, and so on. in the future, you will have at least 24 hours delay before receiving the attribution, and even more for receiving the postback events. So it will change the way we proceed data and we think about the campaigns. There is no view through attribution, meaning the impression tracking that we have at the moment won't be triggered with SKAdNetwork. So it may be an issue for, especially for the companies that invest a lot or have big branding campaigns, because they usually have a lot of impression tracking, and they want to connect the dots between attribution, sources, everything that they do, and sees impact of every data point on every source. So it may have an impact if you have a lot of impression tracking, for example. So only the clicks will be tracked and make an attribution. And the final thing is there is no web to app tracking, meaning that if you are, let's say on Safari on mobile, and you have an ad pushing to the store and to download an app, it won't be tracked through SKAdNetwork because SKAdNetwork doesn't track this. So only app to app, basically. So that's some of the limits. There are others that I won't dig deeper into, but feel free to check on the web. There are the main ones that we need to understand. So now let's talk about SKAdNetwork and the 6-bit conversion value. So what is that 6-bit conversion value? That's probably the most important thing we need to understand at the moment and take actions. So what is it? It's the only way to track post-install events and measure quality of users in an aggregated manner. So it's the only way provided under SKAdNetwork to qualify your users. It's the equivalent of events that we have at the moment with any given tracking. Apple wants to make sure that it's impossible to identify users via conversion values, so via in-app events. So they limit it and constrain it to the minimum data and aggregated data. So you will see that it will really affect the way you will set up your events, set up your 6-bit conversion values. So 6-bit conversion values are numbers 0, 1, up to 6 numbers, and it corresponds to an event you will track in your app. So I made an example on the right table. Tutorial complete, registration add to cart, with a value, a 6-bit conversion value. So 6 figures, 0, 1, and it makes a maximum of 64 values that you can track in your app, not more. Just so you know, it will be impossible to trigger a value associated to an event. Let's take the example of what we do at the moment. At the moment, when we have a purchase, we track the event purchase, and we allocate a value to every purchase. So if the user do a purchase of $10, we send the event and the value of $10 with it. And same way, if we have $25, $50, $7, whatever. Here, we won't be able to do so. So if we have a purchase event, we need to send the purchase event with the value in it, meaning that you have to track every single purchase you want to send as a postback. So if you have let's say an event, a purchase event that's $5, another one that's $10, that would be 2 events to track. And if you have another one that's $20, that would be 3 events. Whereas before you were doing 1 purchase event and then allocating the value, whatever it is. So in terms of integration, it's a bit different. What you need to know about the 6-bit conversion value. So very important is that 1 user will be equal to 1 install and only 1 6-bit conversion value. So Apple will only send 1 postback to the network after the install. So there's only 1 data that will qualify the users. Also, we'll have that 24-hour timer you may have heard of. So the conversion value can be sent only in a limited time frame. So I'll explain this. So first of all, the 24-hour timer starts right after the first open of the app. Okay, so when the user opens the app, the 24-hour timer starts. After, this timer can only be reset every time a new event that you configured is generated. And only the highest 6-bit value will be sent by Apple to the networks and so to the advertiser. So when configuring your data, you will have to think about how that 24-hour timer works, how the conversion value, incremental thing work as well. I'm gonna illustrate this so that it's clearer for you guys to understand this. The 6-bit conversion value can only be updated with a higher value, and you will see that it's very important when configuring, integrating SKAdNetwork and the 6-bit conversion value. And the information regarding this conversion value can be hidden by Apple if data generated is too small, meaning that Apple, in a sense that they really don't want anyone to identify users, to protect users and user data. If, for example, you have a campaign and you only have 1 or 2 installs, and then the postback allocated to this install, Apple may think, okay, there's too few installs, it's gonna be easy to identify the users, so we won't send this data. It's too sensitive. So you have to consider this. It may not happen quite often, but it's another point to really have to know. So let's illustrate what I mentioned so that it gets clearer. I took, let's say, user experience from install to tutorial completion, registration, add to cart, and a purchase. Okay. In my setup, I've integrated different 6-bit values to every event. Okay, and you can see that they are incremental in the way that, as I mentioned, it's only the highest that can update the timer, and that will be sent to the network. So the one we'll receive in the end to manage our campaign. So let's imagine the situation that I start to install my app. Okay, so the timer starts, 24-hour timer starting. 15 minutes after, as a user, I finish the tutorial. Okay, that event then is triggered, meaning that the timer will restart for new 24 hours. And I keep going in my user experience, and I do the registration 15 minutes after my tutorial completion, meaning that 30 minutes after my install. It's a new event that I've been that I configured in my SKAdNetwork, so the timer will restart again because this event is higher than the previous one. And let's keep going. Let's say 12 hours after the install, meaning 11 hours and 30 minutes after my last event, I do an add to cart. So once again, timer restarts. Finally, after 36 hours after the install, meaning 24 hours after my last event, I didn't do any new event that can be recorded. So timers goes off, okay? And in my journey, I do a purchase 45 hours after the install, meaning it's 33 hours after the last event tracked add to cart, but it's too late because I've already, it's over the 24-hour timer. So what happens? Then the purchase event that I've done is not registered. Nobody will know about it because it's too late. It's after it can be registered. So as the timer's off, we'll take the highest 6-bit value, the highest event to be sent to the network. So in the end, to the advertiser to manage the campaign. So in that case, it would be the add to cart that has the biggest value. And after the timer's off. So how to set this up? So one important thing is that all I explained before is very crucial for user acquisition in a, let's say, a post iOS 14 world. Because as everything will rely, or most of the thing data will rely on SKAdNetwork, that setup regarding events, regarding qualifying users is very important. So the good thing is that app developers have the initiative on the setup. So it's you guys as app developers that can manage this. You do that setup as you want. A big advice is to ask your third-party tracker, your tracking tool, to check the integration and how they can help you with this. They won't do the integration for you, but they have solutions to manage the data through 6-bit conversion value to help you guys understand the concepts. Addict Mobile will really advise to, first of all, focus on short-term events, okay? I would say 24 hours would be the best. We can imagine 48 hours, but not too late. Why? Because if you trigger events way after the install happening, it means that you will have to wait a lot of time and budget will keep going. You will keep investing before knowing if it works or not. It may not work, and you keep investing and you don't have any data coming up. So it's really important to focus on short-term events. And then what you have to do is evaluate the long-term behavior of your users depending on those actions that they have done in the very first hours, okay? So you can check all the data that's already available under Android, under iOS, that's not iOS 14, so the previous version, all the data coming through the IDFA, all the data available that shows you what are the users doing in the very first hours in the app and how they behave in the long term. And according to this, build a 6-bit conversion value so that you can, with short-term events, you can anticipate and see what's going to happen in the future for this campaign. We can imagine that you have different events and you could rank the users from 1 to 10 depending on the action they do the very first hours. So if those guys do such actions, they will be ranked 10 because they should be the best on a long-term basis. So that's really is a concept you have to think about. I'll dig deeper just right after. So why you need to do this is because this KPI, the 6-bit conversion value, will allow you to make decisions regarding investments, regarding user acquisition, which source will work, which campaign, and how to manage this. It won't be perfect. We know it. It's not as what we have at the moment, but it's a way to work around the constraints. So how to do the setup? So first of all, as I mentioned, identify events generated in the very first 24 hours, potentially 48 hours. Then analyze the impact of the short-term behaviors on a long-term basis. Let's say, talk about lifetime value projections. Not every business have lifetime values, but as I was mentioning, you can rank your user from 1 to 10. You can do anything that qualify users. So I made let's say an example randomly of the events that could be triggered in the very first hours, let's say 24 hours, and imagine a forecast, LTV forecast on a long-term basis, depending on these events. So let's say my users are generating add to cart on this campaign a lot. So I think their lifetime value will be $5 because that's what it usually happens. And others are generating a purchase under $20. So these users will generate on a long-term basis $18. So I may go more for that campaign that generates more purchase under $20 because it seems to be more profitable for my business. As I mentioned, it's not perfect, but we've seen in the past, as Addict Mobile, managing almost 500 apps, that short-term indicators usually defines long-term engagement. So the thing that users do in the very first hours, the first day, usually tells a lot about how they will convert in the future and the lifetime value they'll bring. Obviously, it's you need a sample that's big enough. If you take one user, it may not follow the pattern of the mass, but statistically, that's what we've seen in the past. And finally, obviously, integrate the 6-bit conversion value and talk to your third-party tracker to facilitate the integration. It's really important. They have different approach. I think they're all going for the same direction, but the way that you should integrate 6-bit conversion value depends on your tracker as well. Couple tips, actually 2 tips on the integration. First of all, you may think of grouping conversions. So you're limited up to 64 values, okay? So you won't be able to track everything, but let's imagine you have a tutorial complete and a registration. Let's say the registration is not mandatory. You can do, you can use the app without registering, but you want an event that's tutorial complete and registration because it usually shows a better engagement. So instead of having 2 events and only one being triggered, you can group them. So if both of them are triggered, you can receive the post back and say, okay, that's those users have done tutorial plus registration instead of just receiving, for example, tutorial. So it's a way to think of how you should integrate the SKAdNetwork and the 6-bit conversion value. Another thing is think about resetting the timer. It's a risky approach, and I explain why. So first of all, you have a timer that's 24 hours. We've talked about it. What you can think of is generate useless events to reset the timer. Let's say session, let's say opening the app. Whatever action is often made by users, so that way you reset the timer and you go for an event that's not happening early in the user experience, maybe 4 days, 5 days after. Let's say 7 days, especially for, I've heard that case a lot, 7-day trial, but we really want to know if the user in the end is going to subscribe, going to pay. So you may do a strategy that resets the timer up to 7 days, but the warning I have to say is that if you delay the timer a lot, the data will take a lot more time to get back to you. And you're not even sure in the end that it will happen for every user, because a user can stop at 3 days to generate the useless events you were thinking of. So it's very risky strategy. So we really advise to work on short-term logic. But if your business needs that strategy, you can really have that in mind to make sure that you get more relevant data on the event that matters to you. What's the action plan then regarding the SKAdNetwork? So I would really recommend to gather the teams, the product team, the marketing team, development team, data team, to build an efficient tagging plan. So you make sure that your 6-bit conversion value will be well integrated. Usually what we see is that SKAdNetwork 6-bit conversion value, it's a technical part that's well understood by developers, but they don't really understand what's going to affect and how it's going to affect the marketing teams. And the other way around, marketing teams kind of worried about the data and how they would receive it, but they don't really understand why they should focus on SKAdNetwork and 6-bit conversion value. So the idea is to bring everyone together and build the best setup possible. So as I mentioned, understand the SKAdNetwork. Every team should understand this and the limits and the 6-bit mechanism. Test and learn at the moment before the Apple's app tracking transparency framework rolls out. make sure your 6-bit conversion value has the right setup, meaning tracking short-term events, ideally 24 hours event. Assign a lifetime value or a quality, I would say, to those events to define them, define those users. So that way you can do A/B test of your setup and see what's the best setup that provides the good data to optimize your campaign. So it's a lot of test and learn at the moment, and you have a small window to do this. And talk to your third-party tracker to discuss the integration of SKAdNetwork and the solution they provide for 6-bit conversion values. So to wrap this up, it's very important to have understanding of this. To me, it's the key thing to do at the moment to prepare user acquisition with iOS 14 when ATT framework will be out. Really important to get the teams together and to understand this. So I hope you enjoyed the video and it gave you insights and helps you to prepare this. The next video will be about the questions that we get from the market and try to give you some answers about this. So thanks again for listening. Feel free to contact your account manager at Addict Mobile or to contact me by email. I'll be happy to help. Thanks a lot.